The sun is dropping behind pale limestone walls, and the air still tastes of dust and horse sweat. Somewhere beyond the gate, a horn calls, not for ceremony, but for survival. You can almost feel the weight of mail on your shoulders, the crush of bodies in a narrow street, the sudden silence before a charge. Stand here with no training, and you probably wouldn't survive. This is the world that birthed the two most famous military religious orders of the Crusader East. And it's also the world that forced them, again and again, to fight like a single organism. The Templars and the Hospitallers began as different answers to the same problem. After Jerusalem fell to the First Crusade in 1099, the roads filled with pilgrims and bandits alike. The Knights Templar, formally recognized at the Council of Troyes in 1129, became a hard-edged escort and strike force vowed to poverty, chastity, obedience, and war. The Hospitallers, recognized a bit earlier as a charitable order, kept hospitals, fed the poor, treated the sick, and only later crystallized into a full military arm. Yet on campaign, care and killing were not opposites. They were phases of the same struggle. In the early 12th century, during crises like the defense of the county of Tripoli and the repeated clashes around Ascalon, their garrisons often stood on adjacent walls, sharing watch schedules, water stores, and warning riders. When armies marched, the combined system was practical. Templars emphasized disciplined shock cavalry lances locked, horses trained to punch holes, while Hospitallers supplied heavier infantry screens, field medics, baggage security, and a second line of mounted knights to stabilize or exploit the break. Their strengths in unity were obvious: redundancy in elite cavalry, best in theater armor, and a culture of obedience that let commanders plug gaps fast. Weaknesses were equally real: rivalry over prestige, different chains of command, and doctrinal inflexibility that could make feints or withdrawals politically poisonous. Soldiers in this blended formation needed more than bravery. They needed close-order riding, signal recognition by banner and trumpet, endurance under heat, and the discipline to hold a charge until the exact moment. A strange side fact: both orders ran vast banking networks in Europe, so a man galloping under their cross was backed by financial systems that could move money faster than most kings. And as academic debate still circles, some historians argue their cooperation was often accidental rather than planned, while others see a deliberate twin-order doctrine. Either way, compared to looser feudal levies or the tactical fluidity of Turco-Arab horse archers, these holy soldiers were gearing up to fight as one unit because the frontier demanded nothing less. The frontier didn't give them time to workshop a philosophy of teamwork. It demanded a shared battlefield language the way a storm demands a roof. By the 1140s, as raids and counter-raids churned the kingdom of Jerusalem, the two orders were learning each other's rhythms in real time. An officially recognized hinge moment was the Second Crusade's failure at Damascus in 1148, where coordination problems among Crusader princes became a cautionary tale. In the aftermath, Templars and Hospitallers pushed harder for standardized marching order, clearer signals, and a tighter division of labor because if nobles could bicker a whole crusade into ruin, the orders had to be the opposite: predictable, interoperable, reliable. On campaign, the combined unit tended to form like this: Templars at or near the vanguard, with their best lances ready for a decisive punch. Hospitallers anchoring either the rear guard or the central reserve. In a pitched fight, the Templars' role was the spear point, compact wedges to rupture an enemy center or smash a flank. Hospitaller knights mirrored them as a second wave, while their sergeants and attached infantry created a living fence: shields, spears, and crossbows to protect the horses from swarming light troops. Think of it as a two-engine machine. One engine burns hot and fast, the other burns steady and long. Strengths of this fused formation were almost engineered. Both orders drilled obedience into muscle memory, so a banner dip or trumpet call could pivot hundreds of men like a door on a hinge. Their equipment was standardized long kite or heater shields, stout lances, arming swords, maces for close crush, and mail reinforced with emerging plate. Weaknesses persisted. An elite heavy profile meant losses were hard to replace, and the shared language could become a shared blind spot. especially against enemies who refused the honorable moment of collision. The skill set required was brutally specific. Riders had to keep knee-to-knee spacing at full gallop. Sergeants had to hold formation under arrow harassment without breaking into a chase. And officers had to read dust, wind, and terrain to time the charge, a lesser-known side fact from Charter. Records, Hospitallers trained some brothers as farriers and veterinarians. So horse care was a tactical asset, not an afterthought. There's academic debate over whether this interoperability was centrally planned or simply evolved through repetition. But compared to the more improvisational feudal hosts of Western Europe or the flexible combined arms systems of the Byzantines, these orders were becoming a rare thing in the Latin East II corporate armies, speaking one tactical tongue. By late autumn of 1177, the kingdom was running on fumes. Raiding seasons had been brutal. Harvests thin, and Saladin's army rolled along the coast like a tide that could decide any day to swallow Jerusalem whole. The Battle of Montgizzard, officially recorded in Latin and Arabic chronicles alike, is where the two-order machine suddenly had to work at full speed with no warm-up. Baldwin IV, the young leper king, scraped together a small force near Ramla. What made it lethal wasn't the number of knights. It was that the Templars and Hospitallers moved as if they'd rehearsed this moment for years. Saladin's host was dispersed on the march, confident and strung out for plunder. The Crusader army, with Templars concentrated in the strike vanguard and Hospitaller contingents supporting the line, advanced fast and tight. Their combined formation functioned like a compressed spring. Infantry and sergeants formed a protective screen to let the mounted brothers keep cohesion. Then the Templars drove a wedge into the enemy's least organized segment. Hospitaller knights followed through the breach, not as a separate glory-seeking column, but as a stabilizing second impact, widening the rupture and preventing Saladin's cavalry from reforming into their usual swirling counter-encirclement. Strengths showed in stark relief. Discipline let them charge at exactly the right heartbeat, not earlier in excitement or later in hesitation. Heavy armor and long lances gave them a short, violent window of superiority at contact, and having to lead orders meant the line didn't collapse after the first shock. But weaknesses were there too. This style needed surprise or favorable terrain. Had Saladin's army been fully aggregated, the same tight wedge could have been smothered by sheer numbers and horse archer harassment. For the soldiers, the skill demands were extreme: close order galloping over broken ground, instant recognition of shouted commands and banner cues, and the nerve to hold formation while arrows hissed in. A strange side fact tucked into later Hospitaller accounts claims some brothers carried small reliquaries into battle, not as magic, but as morale anchors when fear started to nibble at the edges. Academic debate still flickers over what won: Montgizzard royal leadership, Saladin's overconfidence, or the order's drilled unity but compared to the feudal patchwork common in Western Crusader armies, or to the fluid hit-and-run logic of Ayyubid horse archers. Montgizzard highlights something rare: elite heavy cavalry and disciplined support acting as one weapon, not to competing egos. Victory in the open field was only half the war. The other half was stone, hunger, and time measured in weeks rather than minutes. And here the two orders learned to knit their differences into a single siege engine: the long, grinding siege of Acre 1189 to 1191, one of the most officially recognized episodes of the Third Crusade, became their harsh classroom. Acre's walls were thick, its defenders stubborn, and the Crusader camp outside was a city of mud, disease, and political friction. Kings argued, barons sulked, but the Templars and Hospitallers had no luxury to fracture. They were the spine holding the siege together. Functionally, they split tasks in a way that looked almost modern. Templars dominated the forward pressure, night assaults on outworks, aggressive patrols to keep supply routes open, and sudden pushes to seize a breached tower before defenders could patch it. Hospitallers, drawing on their charitable DNA, turned logistics into a weapon, running field hospitals, rationing water, managing the flow of reinforcements, and organizing the infantry screens that protected sappers and engineers when a siege tower rolled forward or a mining team dug under a wall. Hospitaller sergeants, and crossbowmen formed a tight protective lattice, while Templar knights waited behind as a mobile strike reserve ready to surge into any gap that opened. The strengths of this united siege formation were complementary. Templar aggression prevented the defenders from resting or repairing in peace. Hospitaller endurance kept the Crusader host from rotting in place. Their combined command discipline meant fewer panics during sallies, and their financial networks could secure timber, iron, and pay for specialists other armies lacked. Yet weaknesses gnawed. To headquarters in one camp created overlapping authority, and the order's taste for decisive action sometimes clashed with the slow attrition sieges require. Against a clever enemy, rash sorties could bleed scarce elite knights. Skills here were different from Montgisard's gallop. Brothers needed engineering literacy, how to brace a mantlet, judge a ditch's depth, or recognize the tremor of a countermine. They needed stamina to fight after sleepless nights, and the restraint to hold a line under taunting fire. A lesser-known side fact, Hospitaller records mention rotating brothers through medical duty, even during peak assaults, suggesting a proto-system of combat and recovery cycles. There's academic debate about whether Acre was won by royal fleets or by stubborn ground pressure, but compared to earlier Crusader sieges that often relied on feudal enthusiasm, this was siegecraft as a two-order machine: attack and sustain. One unit breathing through two lungs. Acre was a scar and a lesson. But the deeper wound was Hatton in 1187, an officially recognized catastrophe, whose echo never really left the Latin East. The field there had shown what happened when heavy cavalry lost cohesion, under heat, thirst, and harassment, afterward, as the Crusader states rebuilt in the thin coastal strip that remained. The two orders quietly retooled how they fought together, not by abandoning shock, but by engineering the conditions that made shock possible. In the years following Hatton, especially during the defensive wars of the 1190s, Templars and Hospitallers leaned harder into scouting and march discipline. Their combined formation on the move became more elastic, light cavalry screens, and local auxiliaries pushed farther out, feeding constant terrain and enemy reports back to the main body. The Templars still preferred the vanguard spearhead, but now with clearer rules for when to charge and when to feint. Hospitallers, often holding the reserve, acted as the safety latch, a stabilizing line that could absorb a counterattack or cover a withdrawal without turning retreat into rout. Weapons and gear also shifted in subtle ways that mattered. Crossbows became more prevalent in their shared infantry cover, giving them a way to punish horse archers at medium range. Mail was thickened and increasingly reinforced with plate at shoulders and knees. Shields trended smaller for better mounted maneuver. The strength of this post-Hatton unity lay in its realism. They no longer assumed the enemy would offer a clean collision. Their discipline let them wait out skirmishing, conserve horses, and strike only when the odds tilted. But weaknesses remained. This system still depended on high-quality mounts and tight command. If scouting failed or water ran short, even the best doctrine could unravel. The brothers' required skills expanded. A knight had to read a battlefield like a map, judging wind for dust cover, recognizing a fake retreat, keeping a horse calm under hours of arrow harassment. Sergeants needed to form instant hedgehogs of spears and shields, then open lanes for a sudden mounted surge. A strange side fact from coastal records: both orders invested in pigeon posts and coastal beacons, early warning tech that let them synchronize movements faster than most feudal armies. Academic debate argues over whether these adaptations made the orders too cautious, but compared to the all-or-nothing charges of earlier Crusader hosts, or to the Mongol-style deep reconnaissance emerging elsewhere, this was a mature combined unit, still a hammer, now carried in a smarter hand. The horizon kept shifting. By the early 1200s, the Crusader frontier had narrowed to ports and islands, and the two orders who once guarded desert roads now guarded sea lanes, warehouses, and a political idea of outremmer that was fading like paint and sun. Cooperation didn't vanish, it changed theaters. During the Fifth Crusade and its campaign at Damietta 1218 to 1221, an officially recognized event, Templars and Hospitallers again operated as a paired unit, inside a coalition famous for mixed motives. When a breach opened or a sally erupted from the city, the familiar pattern reappeared. Templars driving the sharp counterstroke, Hospitallers sealing the flanks, stabilizing the line, and keeping the siege apparatus alive after the dust settled. In battle terms, this was still the old spring and latch system shot plus sustain only, now used against riverbanks, trenches, and fort capsules rather than open plains. As mainland positions shrank, the logic of unity moved to the sea. On Cyprus and later Rhodes, the Hospitallers refined a fortress and fleet system, and much of the Templars' property, armories, and drill habits was absorbed after the Templars were suppressed. The one unit became a layered garrison, crossbowmen and early artillery crews on the walls. Sergeants drilled to seal streets with pavises and spears, and a small but lethal reserve of mounted brothers or galley marines ready to plug breaches or raid hostile coasts. Strengths here were durability and professionalism. Garrison life demanded constant watch cycles, standardized weapons care, and a clean chain of command that let a handful of brothers hold a breach. While townsmen rallied behind them, soldiers needed different skills than the classic charge naval: boarding discipline, artillery handling, engineering literacy, and the patience to live on alert for months. Weaknesses, though, became strategic rather than tactical. Elite corporations had no demographic depth. They could win fights, yet lose the population war. Their unity also made them political targets. The Templars' fall beginning in 1307 and their dissolution in 1312 ended the partnership, while the Hospitallers survived by adapting to naval, war and diplomacy. A lesser-known side fact from Rhodes archives is that Hospitallers hired Muslim and Greek craftsmen to maintain fortifications, pragmatism hiding beneath rhetoric. Academic debate still asks whether the orders shared discipline, prolonged crusader presence, or merely delayed the inevitable. But compared to feudal militias or rising gunpowder armies, their united system remained a tight professional kernel, small, hard, and increasingly alone. Conclusion and effectiveness assessment seen across the centuries. The moments when Templars and Hospitallers functioned as one unit look less like episodic teamwork and more like a battlefield ecosystem. The Templars supplied a reliable shock corps, decisive charges, relentless patrol tempo, and an ethos that treated hesitation as danger. The Hospitallers supplied depth, medical services that preserved manpower, logistical steadiness that kept campaigns alive, and infantry frameworks that let cavalry stay coherent. Together they created a cycle of combat power: find the moment, hit like a hammer, survive the aftermath, and be ready tomorrow that no single feudal host could reliably sustain. Effectiveness depended on context. In open battles with surprise or favorable ground, Montgizzard being the cleanest case, the United model was devastating, because two elite waves could turn one rupture into a collapse. In sieges like Acre, it provided persistence and technical know-how that kings and barons often lacked. One order pushing pressure, the other keeping men fed, treated, and information. After Hatton, shared reforms made them more realistic against skirmishing enemies and better at enduring the long, hot hours before a charge. Yet those same virtues carried limits. Their command cultures prized courage and obedience, but struggled with strategic compromise. And their elite-heavy makeup meant every loss was expensive in ways that weren't true for mass levies. Compared to other medieval forces, their unity was a paradox. They were less fluid than Turco-Arab horse archer systems, less numerous than Mongol Tumans, and less adaptable to gunpowder than later royal armies, but far more disciplined and interoperable than most feudal coalitions. Their true advantage was not just the lance at impact, but everything around it: logistics and medicine as combat multipliers, standardized signals that kept formations together,